Well, I guess that's kinda cute. Why, hello there, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Air. It's good to see you, and today we're back with another book review and my lovely glared up glasses. Today we're doing the second volume of The Husky and His White Cat, Shizun. The second volume begins right where the first volume left off. So that means our characters are still at the desecrated Jinchen Lake. But one thing I forgot to mention, for those who are unfamiliar with the series and the series like this, is that they were all written as one giant web novel, which means that they were never really meant to split up into sequels. So when you buy the sequels or you continue to read, you'll start to notice that there isn't really a clear break in anything. It's almost as if they just cut it in the middle of the story, which would be true, is exactly what they did. That being said, there is still a very big difference between the first and the second volumes of The Husky and His White Cat Shizun. Also, this review will have spoilers in it. Going back to what I was saying, this volume focuses more on the mysterious plot against Morun. Is that how you say his name? Whatever. Pronunciation, sorry. Yeah, Morun. Sorry. No, I was looking at the pronunciation guide. It is at this point that we discover that he might not have been the only person to come back into this second life. On another note, this book is significantly less spicy, I would say. Morun's thoughts are a little bit more on the down low this time. Granted, Wanning isn't in half of it because he's a child, so. But because of that, we somehow get a much more fluffy book in comparison to the first one, which says a lot but also says nothing because there's still a crap ton of angst in here. Anyway, the difference that I really wanted to talk about was the slight shift of the unreliable narrator. Another thing I forgot to mention is that The Husky and His White Cat Shizun is all written in third person limited. This means that everything we read as an audience is inevitably tainted by the view and perspective of the character from which we are reading it, since all the information can only come from that specific character. The two main perspectives in this book are from Morun and Chuanning, respectively. At this point, you're probably going to say, Air, this man was literally a murderous emperor. Why didn't you think about the unreliable narrator before you started reading this? And I will say to that, I did sort of think of it, but not in the way that I want to talk about it right now. What I do want to talk about is the change of this unreliable narrator as the story goes forward. For the space of 2 books, which is really about 1,000 pages between the 2 characters, we see a lot of improvement. For example, if we go to page 76 through 77, in the first volume, we get the first description from Moran of Chu Wanning. Chu Wanning was a cold-blooded person. In their previous life, Shime had died before his very eyes. Moran had cried and pleaded, tugged at the hem of his robes, knelt on the ground, and begged for his help, but Chu Wanning had turned a deaf ear on his pleas. And so Chu Wanning's own disciple had breathed his last at his feet, while beside him, Moran cried his heart out. Even then, Chu Wanning had watched on without lifting a finger. Less than 100 pages in the story, we get our first opinion of his master. Surprisingly, this image sticks through us throughout most of this whole entire first volume. I'm not gonna lie, when I first started reading this, both main characters were some of the least likable people that I'd probably ever read about. But the crazy thing about this analysis is that Chu Wanning doesn't even defend himself in his own perspective. His self-esteem is so low that he makes it worse. If we go to page 259 of the same volume, we read his description about himself. An injured animal would find a place to hide and lick its wounds. Sometimes Chuaning felt like he was no different from those beasts, and that this solitary existence would probably continue into the future as well. He knew he was unlikable, so he didn't want to beg pitifully for anyone's help. He had his dignity. If I were to sum up in a few words the characters of both Morin and Chuaning in this first volume alone, it would simply be Morin is mean and Chuaning is lonely. Is heartless and lonely. That's not the case at all. And we see this come forth in the second volume of the book. Morin is fundamentally kind, among other things, even if he forgot it. We see this a lot clearer in the second volume, especially as he interacts with Chu Wanning as a child. Not only that, but we see multiple times in the second volume where he actively expresses guilt and regret, which is something he would never have done in the first volume of the book. On the other hand, Chu Wanning may not have had hundreds of friends, but he certainly wasn't alone, and he wasn't exactly heartless. More emotionally stunted. I find it very ironic that the first thing Wanning does in the second volume is comforting a crying disciple, which is exactly what Moran accused him of not doing in his first description of him. He is a man of few words, but those words tend to hit very hard, and we see that multiple times, even in the first volume where he has his very small moments of kindness. In terms of loneliness, it is shown many times that there are many people around him that do care about him. These people are including, but not limited to, Sui Meng, his father, Xuanqi Elder, and Tan Lung Elder. Even in the nightmare / flashback that were given from Chuaning towards the ending of this book, we also see there was an elderly man named Liu Gong who cared for him as well. And I know, coming from the first volume, saying that Mo Run is fundamentally kind and that Chu Wanning is also kind but just super emotionally stunted, can be big words coming from someone who may have only read the first volume and witnessed how terrible a people they kind of both were. But there's a brief interaction in the second volume that I believe proves both of these character traits. On page 432 through 434, we read about a brief meal shared between Chu Wanning and Morun in the inn after the auction. In a sense, Morun makes the first move by ordering off of the menu. After being accused of being in the area before, this is what comes to his mind. Morun started. Until then, he realized he had ordered every single dish in accordance with Chu Wanning's preferences. His only thought had been to make sure Chu Wanning ate well so that he could recover his strength. As they're waiting for the food, Chu Wanning starts making his move as well. Probably for the first time ever, he thanks his student. There's also a brief section directly after the details him asking another elder how not to be so intimidating to his students. The advice he was given was simple. Just do something to show the person that you care. And so we get to witness probably the first conscious effort on Chu Wanning's part to show another person that he cares about them. Patiently introducing new dishes to a disciple was a form of showing care, and so throughout the course of the meal, Mo Run tried every dish in turn and got an earful of descriptions that sounded like they had come straight out of Jiangnan recipes. Of course, this doesn't prove that the world is now square and that both of these people are perfect, but it does prove that they are changing. At this point, Chu Wanning has begun to understand the value of emotional action, while Mo Run has started to rediscover that he was also, at one point, kind. And that, my friends, is the beauty of change. Anyway, this was a book review, so I guess I should say what I liked about this book. My favorite line is on page 25, and it simply says, "Don't cry, you already did great." Can you tell I have a thing for soft Chu Wanning? My favorite chapter follows actually pretty close to that is chapter 52. I would bump up the romantic factor by 1. I would give that a 4 out of 10. Instead of having a spicy meter this time, because there really wasn't a lot in this one, I changed it to a fluffy meter, and I gave it a 7 out of 10 on the fluffy scale. But overall, I liked this section better than the first. The semblance of growth was so much more amusing to watch, even though they continued to fumble around each other the whole time. So I would give the second volume an 8 out of 10. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me in The Refuge. I will be reviewing the next one theoretically soon in the future. I hope to see you guys soon, and if you'd like to see more of me, I stream on Twitch on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I'll put the link in the description below. And happy reading!